Warning. Censorship. Warning. Censorship. Warning. Censorship. Warning. Censorship.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Rebel News live stream on this, a Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. I'm David Menzies, and my co-host, let me tell you about my co-host. You know, she resides west of Toronto, east of Vancouver, north of Antarctica, and south of the moon, baby. She is the she-devil with a sword. She is the Khaleesi of northern Alberta. She is Sheila Gunn Reid. How you doing there, Sheila?
David, I'm doing great. You know, your tie reminds me of the bee emojis you always send me. I really enjoyed that.
That doesn't work anymore for some reason. I type out bee and it used to be a little bee came up, and now it doesn't. And me being a bear of little brain, I can't figure out how to fix that.
You know, every day it's boomers versus technology for you, and usually the technology wins. What's the weather like out there in Toronto? Today, my kids have a snow day. It's that bad. The school buses were canceled. Yeah.
Well, I think it was around 5 degrees. Tomorrow it's going up to 15 or 16, and then it goes back down again. We've had, snow overnight, but it melts by the time, 10 or 11 a.m. comes around. So, yeah, we're still cooking here. But like, you choose to live there, Sheila. I know you love that whole Green Acres thing. I envision your family kind of like, Oliver Wendell Douglas and Ava Gabor out on the farm.
Yeah, I'm just like Ava Gabor, shuffling around the house in kitten heels.
How are your hot
while my
cakes?
husband wears... Yeah, that's me. Hair done in a beehive, shuffling around the house in a gown, while my husband wears spotless coveralls. That's exactly the life I live, David.
Wasn't that amazing? When you would see Oliver Wendell Douglas, with a pitchfork, doing farm chores, wearing a three-piece suit. I mean, that was but that series, I'll tell you, in the later episodes, it becomes more and more surreal, where the characters are breaking the fourth wall. And I bet you it stands up today. I rewatched Get Smart. Love that series. It was just such a gem. I bet you if I rewatch, you know what? That's going to be my Christmas binge viewing. It's going to be go back to Green Acres when it was such a special kind of comedy. And, I got to tell you, I have an acquaintance out in Hamilton. Maybe I shouldn't give his name. I don't want to give him any trouble, but CHCH, Sheila, which is the Hamilton television show that runs a lot of sitcoms, like Green Acres, like My Three Sons, The Odd Couple. Can you imagine? He always emails me because he monitors this. They now broadcast trigger warnings.
No.
Oh, yeah. These are comedies from the 60s and 70s. And if there's anything remotely incorrect, i.e. The character referring to an indigenous person as an Indian, they put an apology before the episode, parental guidance suggested. These are network comedies of the 60s and 70s, and you know what the broadcast standards were like that. And meanwhile, you know what, I think of the dreck, the garbage that's on radio right now in certain genres of music.
Yeah.
And it's the N-word and, the B-word, and it's never ending, but that, for some reason, we're to embrace that as some kind of expression of artistic merit, and yet innocent jokes from the 60s and 70s we have to apologize for. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, from the 60s and 70s, you couldn't even show Fred and Wilma Flintstone sleeping in the same bed because that was too risque, right? Like, they had to have their, twin beds on the cartoon because you couldn't show that married couples slept in the same bed.
That's right.
But now we have to put trigger warnings on that sort of stuff. I was watching the X-Files the other day, and there's a lot of stuff from that first season that wouldn't cut the mustard in today's social justice era at all.
It's kind of funny because if they were to do a documentary about my life, it would be like the 60s or 70s because Lady Menzoid and I don't sleep in the same bed. Anyways, what are we trying to do right now, Sheila, in terms
I don't know. You're trying to get us both fired. That's what you're trying to do. I know that Kane and Mark has complained that I do this every time that we're on the show together. But I have to, because I have to assume that we have new viewers with us every single time that we're on. So this is the Rebel News Daily live stream. For those of you who already know, thanks. Go get a coffee. See you in 90 seconds. For those of you who are new, this used to just be on Friday, just hosted by Ezra Levant. The pandemic struck. We all had to sort of get grounded. We couldn't travel, and many of you were sent home from work. Coupled that with the fact that work has changed, or the news was changing every single day. Restrictions were being lifted, applied. It was happening very fast. And CBC decided not to do any sort of local news. They just were like, oh, all news is local. That's okay. We just won't do it. But we'll take your money, your $1.5 billion, to do less work than ever and not bring you the news. We thought, we'll do it. So we expanded the live stream from just Friday to 5 work days a week. At noon, of course, in Toronto, 10 a.m. out here in God's country. David and I host Tuesdays and Thursdays. I also host on Monday with Adam. We sort of do a Western-based show, and our other talent fills in the gaps on the other 2 days of the week. And it used to be a good chance for people to not only interact with each other, which I think is great, but to support the work that we do through something called a super chat on YouTube. But then Biden got elected and big tech didn't have to pretend anymore. And we were caught up in the second great demonetization when they just said, you know what, conservative YouTube channels, sorry, you just give us your content, but we're not going to give you any ad dollars. So they took away our super chats, took away our ad dollars. But we have 1.5 million YouTube subscribers. We don't want to abandon you. We appreciate every single one of you, even the ones that hate watch us. So we start off our show there. But there will come a time in the show where we end up not only completely demonetized by YouTube, because that's already the case, but we will talk about things that YouTube says you are not entitled to have that information. You can't even hear opinions of other people and thus formulate your own opinion after collecting all the information. YouTube says, no, we're doing the thinking here. And so instead of running afoul of YouTube and getting the channel canceled altogether, which I always suspected David Menzies would do to us, we are simultaneously broadcasting on Rumble, on Super U, and Odyssey. And all 3 of those platforms give you the ability to support the work that we do through tipping us as a creator, a Rumble rant, Hyper Chat on Odyssey, and a Super U shout. And we appreciate everybody who pitches in a little bit of money. It's the most honest way for us to do business, because we rely on the support of our viewers at home instead of just reaching into your pocket and taking it for something you don't want to support, like, you know, Justin Trudeau does with the mainstream media. And Kane and Mark should be back from getting his coffee, so he doesn't have to complain about me. David, take it away.
and you know, Sheila, it's interesting seeing you, talk about the time in which we live. I am of the opinion, I'm sure most of our audience shares this, I'm sure you shared, that the last 2 years have really been the craziest years I have ever lived through. Everything that you mentioned, the censorious thugs in Silicon Valley, President Joe Biden, who sometimes looks like he's lost his mind, if there is a mind there. I want to see how, in the decades ahead, how history is written about this time period. You know, we always come up with some catchy phrase for a decade, the dirty 30s during the Depression, the fabulous 50s, the post-war recovery, the roaring 20s back a century ago. Well, these aren't roaring 20s. These are like insane 20s. And we're only in 21 right now. And I'm sure this continues in 22. Sheila, how do you think the historians are going to chronicle the times in which we live right now?
I don't know how the historians are going to chronicle it, but I do think that it is going to be polished with a certain veneer by the people who write history.
Yeah.
Because if anything we learned over the last, 5 years, I would suggest, is that history is just something you can just reach back into and change. Don't like that statue, what it stood for, tear it down. It's like it never even happened.
Yep.
Slavery didn't happen. We took the statue down. It's fine. Books are being tossed in the garbage. Christian school boards are being forced by ministries of education to remove certain parts of the Bible from their teaching. I mean, it doesn't even matter how history shakes out, how reality shakes out, because it's just going to be chronicled in a certain way that is very friendly to the powers that be. And over the course of the last 20 months, for me, it's been a real awakening. And not in that, it's not that I didn't know that there was evil in the world. I certainly look at the world through a certain worldview, and most of the things we deal with are a spiritual battle manifesting on the reality plane a lot of times. But to see people I thought were good and decent people be perfectly fine with segregation. Yeah. I'm learning that for a lot of people who said their love was unconditional, it's pretty conditional. Oh. And a lot of times that condition is vaccination. A lot of people who I thought were good conservatives are like, nope, the government knows best. The government should tell me who can come into my house, and I will definitely listen. For me, it's really separated the wheat from the chaff. And I'm really pleased with, some of the people I sort of thought were like, oh, they're just going about their business, minding their own business generally in the world. Those people have really impressed me because they're the ones who say, I am vaccinated, but I'm not doing any of this discriminating against my friends. There are people who are conscientious objectors, and I never thought that I would have to use that word in 2021, but they're out there, and I'm happy to say that I know quite a few of them.
You're quite right. As the saying goes, history is written by the victors, and here's my hope, Sheila, that as you know, our friend Mark Levin has written that fantastic book, American Marxism, and that is such an apropos descriptor for what is happening in America in terms of the indoctrination everywhere, from education, entertainment, to the courts, and politics. And what my hope is that what we saw earlier this month in so many electoral districts, specifically Virginia, where you saw blowback against this American Marxism. You saw people rejecting their children being indoctrinated with critical race theory. So I think that bodes well for next year with the midterm elections. Who knows what's going to happen in Canada? We don't seem to, our leader, the leader of the official opposition, is that in title only. He's missing in action. I'm almost expecting to pick up a carton of milk and see Aaron O'Toole's face on it. Have you seen this man? Call this 1-800 number. So what I'm getting at is, in the years to come, maybe we're going to see a blowback to this social justice warriorism, this political correctness, this cancel culture, mob mentality, and things will return to normal. And then the historians in the 2030s can write the history of, look how close we were to the abyss, but thank God we regained sanity before going all in terms of Marxism, because that's what it is. It's beyond progressivism. It's beyond far leftism. This is Marxism that we're seeing come to fruition after decades of infiltration in so many of our institutions, Sheila.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot of our so-called conservatives are actually just fiscally responsible Marxists. You know what I mean? They're just business-friendly Marxists, because everything else they do is just centrally planned. Yeah. These same politicians who told us, you know what, the family is the building block of society, and that is the first government. And that's the best government, where decisions are best made. They're the ones telling you, actually, no, you can't see your family. You can't have those people in your house. And saying, you know what? We're keeping you safe. That's the soft tyranny of public safety. That's all that is. It's not any different than in outcome than the state standing at the end of your driveway and saying your friends can't come over. I mean, the outcome is still the same, and it's central control of your life.
And Sheila, with all of these issues, with all of these scandals, like seriously, where is Aaron O'Toole? Is he in a bunker? Is he in a treehouse? I mean, he's had less than half the press conferences Justin Trudeau has had since the election. I mean, you'd think if you're the opposition, you're there every second day, you know, getting your name out, getting your message out. The guy's, what is the strategy? I don't understand.
Neither do I. And I don't really understand the strategy of the Conservatives who are rallying around him. You know, Denise Batters, God love her. Every time I'm like, you know what? The Senate's awful. We just need to get rid of it. Denise does something good. And I'm like, oh, yeah, no, that's right. There are good people in there who are, you know, principled. And Denise Batters, Conservative senator appointed by Harper in Saskatchewan, has said that it is time for the members, not the party, upper echelons, not the MPs, since they work for us, but the members to have a say and then decide on whether or not Aaron O'Toole should remain leader of the party. And if you are confident that you have the support of the membership, you should welcome this, right? It's the same thing when I'm like, yeah, that's why I believe in right to work legislation, because people should have a choice. I just think that, like with unions, if people had a choice, they would never join one. If people had a choice about Aaron O'Toole, the members, they would probably not choose him. Dean Del Mastro had a really great tweet thread yesterday. Dean Del Mastro, former Conservative MP, because Denise is being attacked left and right from MPs, loyalists to Aaron O'Toole. And all she's saying is, give us a say, because he lost the election. Now it's time for introspection. Stephen Harper stepped down the night he lost the election. Yep. The night. He didn't linger on. He said, the people have spoken. I didn't lead us to victory. This is not like, you know, we got close. We actually got further away this time. You know, there's an argument to be made for, you know, if they had increased seats and still were the opposition in a minority parliament, there could be an argument. I would listen to that argument. I wouldn't agree with it, but I would at least listen to it if Aaron O'Toole had increased the seats with his ridiculous strategy of ignoring Alberta while sucking up to suburban moms on issues that they don't actually care about in Toronto. But yeah. Yeah.
Good one.
So funny. I don't know if you can find that tweet thread from Dean Del Mastro, because he makes a really great point, and he was a Harper guy. Yeah. So the federal, and this is a really good point, and the points he's going to make here are similar to what's happening to Jason Kenney, and I'll get to that in a second. Dean Del Mastro says, the federal Liberal Party changed leaders after every losing election beginning in 2006. The same arguments about staying united and focusing on fighting the other party were made particularly in the case of Stéphane Dion. They were wrong. And this is true. Whether or not you like Justin Trudeau, they figured out a winning formula in him, and that he's just an idiot that people will vote for, I guess, is the strategy there. But I mean, they're winning. Let's keep going, though. Sorry, don't take it down. Dean says, does anybody believe that if given another chance that Stéphane Dion would have defeated Stephen Harper? The Liberals made the change, and Michael Ignatieff did even worse. So we're looking at Scheer and O'Toole as overlays here. He resigned, and they changed again. The party survived 4 different leaders in 4 successive elections. Recent history shows that those arguing that Denise Batters' efforts are cause for celebration for Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party are wrong. The truth is that they are concerned that Aaron O'Toole or his policies will not survive a vote of membership, and with good cause. That's exactly it. There's a reason they don't want to put this to the people. Given the rising cost of energy, groceries, and the cost of living generally, it will not be easy for Aaron O'Toole to justify his decision to support carbon taxes. Social conservatives feel betrayed, and the West is just flat out angry and feeling abandoned by the Conservative Party leader. Dean's from Ontario too, so he's getting this right. Yep. The bottom line is that now the only time that a leadership review can occur, and it should. So they're, again, as I always say with Jason Kenney, they're running out of runway here, because this government will fall in about 2 years. The suggestion that a review can wait until 2023, a time when an election could really be imminent, is dishonest at best. It's really a way to simply avoid membership altogether. The Conservative caucus may be divided on the issue, but the decision on who leads the party is not theirs to make. That responsibility rests solely on the Conservative Party members. The leader must have the confidence and support of membership, which can only be demonstrated with a full membership vote. That goes for Aaron O'Toole, but it sure as hell goes for Jason Kenney too.
You know, that's amazing, Sheila, the idea of 2023 being picked as a date. As you know, the life of a minority parliament in Canada is typically 18 to 24 months. That puts us exactly in the sweet spot of 2023 when we will almost certainly be going to the polls. So the idea that the leadership review can wait till then, no, because as he said, it will be imminent. The excuse then, well, we can't have a leadership review. It's too close to the election writ just dropped. Absolutely astounding. I mean, you talked about Stephen Harper resigning on the night of the 2015 election. I'm happy to accept the Andrew Scheer long goodbye of 11 months. If, O'Toole could just say, I'm gone by next August. I'll take it. But this idea of him being the invisible man with laryngitis on Parliament Hill, what a disgrace. What a lack of spine. What a lack of leadership, what a lack of testicular fortitude. Anyway, we better move on to our first topic. We were talking about history at the beginning of the show. Here's a man I wish was going to be history in September, but didn't work out that way. Justin Trudeau and the Prime Minister, oh, this is interesting, Sheila. He conducted psychographic polls before calling the COVID election. Psychographic polls, Sheila. What's that?
I know, it sounds crazy, right? AD, can you bring up the article? I think our team wrote it up. Okay, so we've got it on Blackbox, but our team wrote it up as well. It should be published on the Rebel News site. But Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the COVID election, and it's interesting that they call it that, after staff conducted psychographic polling that showed most Canadians trusted the cabinet and were, quote, very angry with people who didn't follow pandemic rules, records indicate. Pollsters suggested messaging in exploiting divisions among voters. You can actually see Justin Trudeau do this in real time, where he's saying stuff like those people and pitting Canadians against each other. I actually, as I was saying in the morning meeting, generally with Justin Trudeau, I attribute idiocy instead of malice, because sometimes I think he's just too dumb to be malicious. But this was a conscious effort to pit Canadians against each other, to demonize, marginalize, and scapegoat people who are unvaccinated for a whole host of reasons. But not just people who are unvaccinated, but people who are opposed to lockdowns and vaccine passports. Justin Trudeau, here it is. The study divided Canadians into 5 groups. The first group, called the Engaged, consisted of 29% of respondents. Engaged people have a lot of trust in scientists, get very angry when they see others not adhering to public health measures, and say government restrictions have not gone far enough. Far enough? What, do they want to take us all to prison? Let's go back. Sorry. Leave it up, please. The second group, the Concerned, accounted for 20%. They are afraid personally of getting the virus. These are the people who watch too much CBC. They're scared of the things that the man on the TV are telling them. They're probably the ones who yell at you in the grocery store, or like they see you going the wrong way, pushing your cart down the aisle, and then like turn on their heels and run away. Concerned people were also angry with scofflaws who ignored COVID rules and strongly believe government restrictions have not gone far enough. Believers were typically women under 34, students, and part-time workers. I look at this and I'm like, people with lots of cats. Anyway, a third group, the Trusters, totaled 17% of respondents. Trusters are characterized by very high levels of trust in institutions. Oh my goodness, including governments, businesses, scientists, medical professionals, the pharmaceutical industry, and news media. Trusters were typically male francophones with higher incomes. That kind of shocks me. But as a male francophone, you'd be very easily like shoehorned into the public service, because if you're not bilingual, you just can't be in the public service. So it's funny how that's like in Quebec and Albertans are exactly the opposite of this. Researchers said 2 remaining segments of voters were most resistant to cabinet messaging. One group, called the Stoics, 22% of respondents, were unconcerned by compliance with COVID rules. Stoics are lukewarm about getting the COVID-19 vaccine. They are the segment most likely to say they will probably get a vaccine only once they are confident it will work. So this is normal people. This bothers me that only 25% or 22% of people are normal. The group was, okay, so the group is comprised of normal people, like the builders, makers, doers of the world, the people that you need in the economy. The group was comprised typically of working-aged men and visible minorities with spouses and children. So that's interesting although it's not, because polling has showed that visible minorities are the least likely vaccinated demographic. And I get it. The whole host of medical experiments done on visible minorities over the years. So I get that they're skeptical about the government saying, take this thing, it'll make you better. Is it tested? Sort of, I get their skepticism. But this is interesting because the people who are the so-called Stoics are so often lumped in by the media and Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. I think I'm repeating myself here when I say the Liberals and the media, like they're two sort of separate groups when they're not. They're just Liberals with jobs in media. But they're so often called white supremacists. Anyways, the final group, called the Skeptics, was 11% and had a strong, had a strong mistrust of all institutions, including the federal government. I would say especially the federal government. The vast majority believe government restrictions have gone too far, wrote researchers. Skeptics were typically prairie residents, white Canadian-born, aged 25 to 44, and the least likely to care when they see others not adhering to public health regulations. So this is people who just mind their own business, too busy minding their own business. Let's go back, though, because it says how Justin Trudeau capitalized on this. Last February 11th, Trudeau said vaccine advice was best left to Canadians and their doctors. You're not taking medical advice from me, he said. After the psychographic study, the Prime Minister on August 15th called the election as a referendum on vaccine mandates. He said the answer to tyranny is to have an election where you get more tyranny. Trudeau went further in an August 31 campaign rally. Canadians who declined a COVID shot, he said, were putting our kids at risk. He said, what about my choice to keep my kids safe, said Trudeau. What about our choices to make sure we're getting through this pandemic as quickly as possible? Now, the upside to this is that the Liberal Party lost 462,000 votes. However, he didn't lose the election, and he pitted. It's the most cynical of politics to pit Canadians against each other, to scapegoat one group so that you can gain the other votes group. He couldn't run on policy. He couldn't even run on consistency because in a matter of months, he changed his own opinion on vaccine mandates. And the thing about those skeptics that doesn't bode well for Jason Kenney is that, as pointed out, those skeptics are Jason Kenney's base. And Jason Kenney is full QR code. Those are 25 to 44 productive people from the prairies. That's the conservative base out here. And they don't like vaccine passports, and they don't care about regulations. And they don't care if you don't care about regulations. And yet, yesterday was QR code day in Alberta. So, if anything's to be learned from this, and I don't know if politicians are all that capable of learning things, it's that Justin Trudeau is exactly the opportunistic politician that we know he is, but Jason Kenney has misread the room completely.
As has, I think, Doug Ford here in Ontario, Sheila. You know, it's funny. The first thing that springs to mind, I'm looking at the category you fall into as a skeptic. You're in the prairies, right? You're white, I think. You're Canadian-born. And I'm going to assume, we never ask a lady what her age is, folks, but I assume you're in that demographic of 25 to 44. And what I can't help but
barely.
think...
I'm just under the wire.
By that much, Chief. What I can't help but think, Sheila, is especially on the left, haven't we been told for a few decades now that we are not supposed to do this when it comes to law enforcement, i.e. racial profiling? Oh, no. We can't bring out the numbers. We can't bring out the data. We can't examine the demographics. That would be racist or sexist or transphobic, you name it. And yet here they're doing it right out in the open. So, and you know, Sheila, it's so bad, I can tell you, I hear crime stories being reported on the radio during my commute back and forth to Rebel headquarters, and they'll say, the suspect is described as 25 to 30, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing a blue hoodie, medium build. What's missing? Yeah, the race. I mean, even with a cap, eyeglasses on or sunglasses on, a face diaper for COVID, you can still see the skin color. How did it become racist to report the skin color of an offender at large? But that is de rigueur right now in crime reporting. It is absolutely incredible. And I'll tell you, I want to get into the other part you mentioned, scofflaws of COVID rules. That would be me if producer Reid can find my Ottawa bus shelter report. Now things are becoming clear to me why when we were in Ottawa, there's actually mandatory mask rules for waiting for the public transit bus to come. Outside. And if you don't, there's another little sticker on the bus shelter. I'm not going to give it away. It's to advise what the COVID Karen rats should do if they see an unmasked person in a bus shelter. My God, Sheila, as if public transit couldn't be horrific enough. Now we have to deal with that. When producer AD finds that, we should run that. It's a very short. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, then. I've been admonished. Okay, so there you go. Here's the deal. We're not going to play it, but as you can see, there's the poster saying mandatory masking in English and French. And if you notice off to the side, there's a red and white sticker, not the no smoking one, the one above it. That's the Crime Stoppers sticker. So, Sheila, if you see somebody like me in the bus shelter, could you imagine that call coming into dispatch? Calling all cars at the corner of Kent and Queen Street. There is an unmasked individual. Proceed with caution.
David,
so I guess...
I've got a theory. I've got a theory, and it just came to me. This is probably the only crime that they can solve these days, because I have seen City of Edmonton press releases where they've actually wasted a sketch artist's time to draw a picture of a guy in a baseball cap and sunglasses wearing a mask. And I'm like, so my husband, me, I guess, like it was just like sunglasses, and like run of the mill, nothing even significant about the hat or the sunglasses, and wearing a hoodie. And I'm like, that could be me going to PV Mart. You know what I mean? Like, it was just, and I can't believe they wasted a sketch artist's time on that. But maybe that's the thing. This is a crime that they can actually solve, because they can actually say, okay, well, I actually know what that guy looks like, because his face is not covered by a blue piece of paper.
Yeah. Well, it is amazing. And by the way, you know, Sheila, there was a lot of chatter around election time that this could be Justin Trudeau foisting himself on his own petard. The fact that he called a $610 million nothing burger election, it resulted in basically the status quo that existed. I strongly dispute that. The fact of the matter is there are so many MPs in the Liberal Party of Canada that are absolutely loyal to Justin Trudeau, and I understand the loyalty. We go back to 2011, Sheila. This was a party, the natural governing party of Canada. It wasn't even the official opposition. It was the NDP and Justin Trudeau. And listen, I'm no fan. Oh my goodness, I'm no fan. But that was a Herculean feat, what he did. Take a party from third place to a majority government, and suddenly nobodies were turned into MPs, and they are loyal to them. And the only way Justin Trudeau is leaving is on his own accord. When he's tired of it, when he's bored of the job, when he, wants to go to, go surfing at Tofino more than he does want to go into the House of Commons. That's the only thing that's going to oust him, because there's no critical mass in that party to eradicate him, regardless of the scandals and regardless of the nothing burger election. That's it.
Well, yeah, he's got the best of both worlds. He doesn't actually have to be competent. He can take vacation whenever he wants, even to celebrate national days of mourning, really, that he has created. He could just go surfing. He's got the Challenger jets that just fly him around whenever he feels like. And frankly, as a now Albertan, the less he works, the better it is. So usually I'm like, you know what? It would be nice if you didn't steal your salary from me today. However, I'm like, you know what? It's cheaper. It's cheaper to just pay him to do nothing than to encourage him to work. So, why resign? Why ever step down? Why ever?
Sheila, and speaking of Days of Remembrance, I see our second topic here is the Prime Minister's office garbled the November 11th tribute. Now, as you know, Sheila, I, along with cameraman Maurizio, we were in Ottawa, right at, the cenotaph, the gorgeous National War Memorial. You'd think Remembrance Day, Sheila, that would be nonpartisan. It wouldn't be political. But yet again, we were told, Maurizio and I could not go on the press riser. That's so we could get a bird's eye view of all the ceremonies. We had to be in the crowd, and it's not that I'm dismissing that we're part of the crowd. I mean, it was wonderful being amongst all these wonderful patriots coming out to pay their respects. The point is, folks, even though we were right there, we couldn't tell what was happening because of where we were. There was a Jumbotron screen, but no audio. And you'd think that, my goodness, the poppy turned a century old this year. You'd think they would get the Remembrance Day ceremonies down to a T in our national capital. But so you saw pictures, but you didn't hear what was happening. And of course, we do know two things. Justin was late. And of course, even more shocking, I think, was the Governor General showing up during the 2 minutes of silence. Now, the explanation, of course, Sheila, is there was some security threat, and I'll take them at their word. And of course we know what happened in 2014 to Nathan Cirillo at that very war monument. So you can't, take these things in a cavalier fashion. But the fact is, once the threat was dismissed, why in the world, Sheila, would the Governor General just say, "Oh, please don't drive up right now. Just wait another 90 seconds. Don't drop it. This is the 2 minutes of silence." How could you be so tone deaf to think this ceremony is about you, a dignitary, an elite, as opposed to those who gave their lives, made the ultimate sacrifice, and those veterans that are still among us?
This is a symptom of the entire government, though, under the Liberals. Justin Trudeau with a teddy bear taking a selfie on an unmarked grave, taking selfies at the war memorial right after the ceremonies. But also, this is a place where Nathan Cirillo was killed. So this isn't like a place where you just grab a couple friends, show your chiclets to the camera and take a picture. He's got no sense of propriety at all. And he really should have taken in some of this just simply through osmosis after being on the job for 6 years. But you also have to remember, this is a guy who's been in the public eye since birth. And yet he can't figure out how to behave when people are watching him. He's as close to Canadian royalty, I guess, as you would get. When you look at the royals, though, by and large, the good ones, they're behaved. They realize that the cameras are always on them, to the point where they always dress in bright colors because they realize that people show up to look at them. So make sure you're wearing something to be seen. But this guy just acts like a jackass anytime there's a camera around. And the worst part is the media, who are supposed to hold him to account, are like, yeah, look how cool he is. It's the worst.
You know, Sheila, and like I'll use one of your phrases for Remembrance Day, he dusted off Sophie to bring her out to lay that wreath. And they do that pregnant pause where they're staring at that wreath. And oh my God, if only I had the powers of the amazing Kreskin that I could read minds. I bet you he's thinking, oh God, all these fuddy-duddies. I could be surfing in Tofino. What do you want to bet that was going through his mind, Sheila? He has no respect for the military. He's told us already that veterans are asking for too much. And yet, on the flip side, gives a $10.5 million check to our homegrown Al-Qaeda terrorist, Omar Khadr. So we know he has no respect whatsoever when it comes to laying that wreath.
No, likely in his head, it was just the Meow Mix song on repeat. Just meow, 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 until the time was up, until like a buzzer went off on his watch. And he's like, I did it. I shut up for 2 minutes. This article in Blacklocks, by the way, is something else. If you don't have a subscription to Blacklocks, I recommend it. I can't recommend it enough. It's worth the money.
Yep.
It's a little bit expensive, but they're just, a tiny little shop, and they don't take any money from Justin Trudeau. They never will. And they are one of the few people in media who are actively doing access to information to hold the government to account. And this is crazy, this article. I mean, this article is worth your subscription just to get it out from behind the paywall. The PMO garbled the November 11th tribute. Okay, this is so great because she says stuff like, I remember always, while not having a clue what she's remembering. Okay. The Prime Minister's office. This is what happens when you only take Sophie out of cobwebs for like a couple times a year. She's not good. She's out of practice. The PMO, the Prime Minister's office yesterday had no comment. Yeah, no kidding. After Sophie Gregoire Trudeau vowed to remember always her grandfather killed in Normandy in 1944. Mrs. Trudeau did not have a grandfather killed in Normandy in 1944. Today, we take the time to be deeply grateful for all the service and sacrifices of the women and men who served Canada. Mrs. Trudeau wrote in a November 11th Facebook post, adding, I share this poem that I wrote in tribute to my grandfather, Jean-Robert Gregoire. He lost his life during World War II, she wrote. May his spirit and the spirit of all those who have dedicated to protecting our country inspire our daily bravery. We will remember always. Except Mrs. Trudeau had no grandfather killed in Normandy. Federal records, including a book of remembrance of war dead, lists a Lieutenant Jean-Robert Gregoire of Quebec City, who was killed in Normandy in 1944 at age 22. Mrs. Trudeau, in a second social media post, said the Normandy casualty was her great uncle. So she wrote a poem for a guy she's never met, told everybody that was her grandpa. Somebody fact checks her on it, and then she's like, oh yeah, no, sorry. I'm always remembering my great uncle. My great uncle, not my grandpa. I know his spirit and the spirits of all who served live on through us all. Do they, Sophie? Because whose spirit is in you right now? You have no clue. And then she says, lest we forget, but she's apparently hard of remembering. To Robert, her poem, Under the Blue Sky of Normandy. The pretentiousness of this broad. Writing a poem for a guy she's never met and has no clue who he is, and then posting it on the internet as though this is her grandfather with such heartfelt attachment to this man. She didn't even know who he was, what guy this was. She thought this was her grandpa. With a sad heart to say goodbye. Your heart is sad? You don't even know who this guy is. Is he your uncle? Is he your grandpa? And to offer a last greeting. You never had a first greeting, sister, for the courage that you had. Your smile, I would like to see it in your happy days, the poem continued. We will be brave at home as you have been on the battlefield. On us you can count. Rest in peace. your little Sophie. She called herself this guy's little Sophie. He didn't even know her, and she didn't know him. She didn't even know who he was, whether it was her grandpa or great uncle. This woman, what a piece of work. Put her back in storage. I'm annoyed.
for Mr. Gregoire, I commend him on his service, making the ultimate sacrifice. But for Sophie, this comes, I think, perilously close, Sheila, to stolen valor.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, you can't even remember the relationship in the family, and I'll never forget. Well, at least let's be, grateful for little miracles. At least Sophie didn't break out to, a candle in the wind, and sing a song.
I was going to say, let's be glad she didn't break into song. But she even called herself your little Sophie.
Oh.
You don't know this guy. He died before you were born. How could you be his little Sophie? But you didn't even know what his familial relation was. And she's just like, yeah, I wrote a poem. I'm the best. I'm an artist. I wrote a poem. This woman, what an embarrassment she is.
She's back in the attic again, Sheila. When do you think as you call it, the cobwebs will be cleansed off her and brought out into the public eye again? Because it has become less and less frequent the longer Justin Trudeau is Prime Minister, isn't it? And I don't know what's behind that. We can only speculate, I guess.
I don't know. You know what, though? It's good that they're not out a lot together because, on some level, when you see two people and you're like, yeah, what a couple those two are. But then on the flip side, you're like, at least they're not ruining two homes. At least they found each other. Sometimes I look at them like that. But I don't know how these two people can be simultaneously as stupid as each other and as embarrassing as each other. Look at this. You know what? Stick her back in the attic at Rideau Cottage, put a lampshade over her head, take her out in 18 months just before the government falls, and take her on the campaign trail. But I can't handle the two of them out there embarrassing the country constantly. I just can't.
It's like we're watching the Muppet Show there.
Yeah.
I just want them to go on one more exotic trip. Like they did to India, just to see if they've learned that lesson. Maybe they have learned a lesson. What am I saying? Last month, Trudeau went to Scotland. He didn't show up in a kilt and sporran, just a regular business suit, 100% of Scots that aren't involved in, say, a wedding ceremony or what have you. So maybe the penny has dropped. Anyways, why don't we go to our first video? I ventured down to the Scotiabank Arena last night, Sheila, with cameraman and film editor extraordinaire Lincoln J. And Dave Chappelle was in town. And of course, the cancel culture mob, I guess, how would I describe them? The radical transgender community. They were screaming about the very idea that Dave Chappelle was on Canadian soil to begin with. But much like Netflix, that did not cancel his special, The Closer, Maple Leaf Sport and Entertainment did not cancel the show. And it's very odd. Maybe I'll save my observation for after we run the... and then, of course, there's Pride Toronto denouncing the show. But to the credit of everybody involved, the show did indeed go on. So why don't we throw to some video of what Lincoln and I found last night outside the Scotiabank Arena. Why is the cancel culture mob out to silence Dave Chappelle?
I don't see them.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know who those people are. I just think he's hilarious, and I'm here to support him.
It's a shame, and I don't know where these people come from. If you were born in Canada, you are not Canadian. That is anti-Canadian. It's anti-Western. Maybe you should be like me, travel the world, and go see what living under tyranny is truly like.
Are there some people, I guess, that are off limits to when it comes to the comedy business these days?
Yeah, see, to be completely honest, I don't want to say something that's gonna come out to get me, so I'm gonna stay away from this type of conversation.
Dave Chappelle gets to speak. I, Jason Bard, get to speak. You get to speak. We all get to speak. You don't have a right to cancel me. I don't have a right to cancel you. You see, this is how we get progress in life.
They're going after Dave Chappelle. No one's off limits. No one's safe, okay? Watch out, all right, if you're a comedian.
Okay, to the cancel culture mobsters and the people that support cancel culture, why? Why do you support that? What is your ultimate goal? To destroy speech? To have everyone walking around saying the same things? To have no individual thought any longer? Is that your end game? Is that what you want? To have everyone walking around in Canada, hi, and it's like, I'm going to know what you're going to say, because we're only allowed to say certain things, because once we cross the line and we get the cancel culture mob after us, right? We get canceled. And what do you want to do? Destroy me, destroy him, destroy anyone that has an idea that falls outside yours.
Now, here's the thing, Sheila. 2 takeaways. We did find a couple of people, as you just saw, that did speak their minds, but the vast majority of respondents that we approached, and I did not expect this. This was a shock to me, because I thought if you're a Dave Chappelle fan, you are going to be eloquent, you are going to be anti-cancel culture, you are going to be pro-free speech, and you're going to shout it from the highest rooftops. Instead, people were terrified to come on camera, and a constant theme, Sheila, were people saying, look, I love Chappelle, I love Rebel News, like that was our audience there, a lot of the people, but if I'm seen on YouTube defending Dave Chappelle, I'm worried that this radical trans community is going to come after me or my business, and I'm out of business. So these people were self-censoring themselves, even though they had plenty to say about the lunacy. The other thing, as you saw, the Pride Toronto condemning Chappelle here, the bitter irony, I think, is this, Sheila. This is a community, you know, the LGBTQ plus, I can't remember all the letters, that for decades, and in many cases, rightly so, has asked for tolerance, has asked for understanding. Yeah. But when it comes to somebody...
And the right to express themselves however they see fit. And I think that's what this comes down to.
Yes, including illegally in terms of full frontal nudity at pride parades. Nobody gets ticketed for that, absolutely not. And that is an actual criminal code offense. The same people that are asking for tolerance and understanding are totally intolerant and non-understanding when it comes to a comedian. And I don't know, if Sheila, if you have seen the Dave Chappelle Netflix special, The Closer. I would say, you know, I was shocked, not at the content, but at the fact that he wasn't really telling transgender jokes. He was making observations, and I thought they were very deep in terms of his observations. And I kept turning to Lady Menzies and I said, at what point are we supposed to be offended? Because I don't see any offense. And also, it's not as though that was the only target. He made that joke, you know, you see these alien sightings, and his theory is that there was an ancient civilization on Earth. They moved away to another planet. Something bad happened. Now they're coming back as extraterrestrials. I have a name for this movie, Space Jews. And, you know, Lady Menzies, who is Jewish, that was her biggest laugh. Like, why isn't the Jewish community losing their shite like the trans community is? You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. I also want to point out, I don't know if we have video. I think I sent it to you and Mr. Producer in the morning. It was when I ventured out to a Toronto library in October of 2019. And this is what I was expecting to see last night. And the mob, the furious, incoherent trans mob that came out with their allies, if you can imagine, Antifa, right, trying to bully Meghan Murphy, a feminist, calling her a TERF, which is a slur against her. And, you know, this was a little library with a few dozen people that were part of the audience. Suddenly, the bully brigade is out in full force on October 2019. But when it's 20,000 Dave Chappelle fans at Scotiabank Arena, where are the radical trans people? Where is Antifa? You know, these gutless cowards, like true bullies, they don't have the testicular fortitude to come up when the odds are against them. What a disgrace. There was all kinds of whispers that they were going to be out there protesting. They weren't. They were terrified, as if anything was physically going to happen to them. That's their department. And I can tell you, in October 2019, I was by myself covering that, Sheila. If there wasn't a law enforcement presence, I would have had the crap kicked out of me. I had Antifa people surround me with flags, so I couldn't even move until a police officer came along. And but like I said, when there's 20,000 versus a few hundred, they're not showing up for that battle. What a disgrace. I'll let you weigh in on your observation, Sheila.
Yeah, and what a bunch of misogynists, what a bunch of sexists that they would show up in full force to try to bully a woman into shutting up about her lived experience instead of your costume experience as a woman. But I noticed something in the background of your video, and it said that Trevor Noah is coming to town later on in the year. And, Trevor Noah, the guy who declared himself a Cuomo-sexual as everybody else's grandparents were being euthanized in Cuomo's, in the nursing homes in New York State, and Cuomo was grabbing everybody's behind in his office. And you know what? Because the right doesn't, not that we don't care that Trevor Noah's gross, but if people want to go and pay good money to see a gross guy, that's none of our business. And he's not going to be protested. And I think that's what's really going on here is, like the right, we're like, you know what? That guy's gross. I don't like him. You know what I'm going to do? Do something better with my time. Because
100%.
If people want to show up and listen to that, it's none of my business. I'm the skeptic from Justin Trudeau's his polling. But for the left, it's not enough that they don't pay attention to that guy. That guy literally cannot exist. They don't want anybody to hear from him. And that's because they can't win on the marketplace of ideas.
And either you are all in on free speech or you're not. And as you know well, Sheila, a few weeks ago, we had the Supreme Court of Canada weigh in on the Mike Ward case. And 5-4 in favor of Mr. Ward, the comedian, who was going to be. That was how close. That if it was 5-4 the other way. And by the way, it should have been 9-0. I don't know what those four other justices were thinking. What a dangerous precedent for free speech in Canada that was going to set. You can't carry out offensive comedy? What are we going to create a new government bureaucracy, the Ministry of Comedy, where comedians have to submit
where
their
nothing
material?
is funny.
Yeah. The
Ministry of Comedy when nothing is funny. Just like the Ministry of Truth where everything's a lie.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So, and by the way, and it just goes to what we've always said, you do not have the right not to be offended. That's simply the way it is. Sticks and stones. Remember that phrase? And I want to say something, Sheila. I wasn't kidding when I said, where's the beef? I was kind of like Clara Peller watching the Chappelle Closer special on Netflix. Where's the hate? Where's the transphobia? And in subsequent articles, when I read, it seems that his observation that has caused the trans community, at least some of them, to lose their marbles is this, quote, "Gender is a fact. Every human being in this room, every human on earth had to pass through the legs of a woman to be on earth. This is a fact," end quote. That's right. It's science. It is true. It is a fact. If you're upset about that, get over yourselves, because that's biology 101, and that trumps spirit unicornism 101 or whatever the hell it is that they're following. So I'm very happy that the show indeed went on last night. Sheila Gunn Reid.
I think we should get to the next thing that's in the YouTube title of the video, because then I get letters if we don't get to it, and it's the Kyle Rittenhouse stuff.
Right.
Yeah, and AD says we have to do it really quick. Okay. So maybe let's just show the infographic of from Fox News. I don't know if people at home have been following the Kyle Rittenhouse case closely, but the people who intend on rioting in Wisconsin, they probably have not been watching the same trial that I have. So Fox News this morning, because I watch after the kids get on the bus, but before my morning meeting, they had this infographic about how the media not only got it wrong, but continues even last night and this morning in their broadcast to get it wrong. And if they riot in Kenosha, it is because the mainstream media has whipped these people up into a bloodlust, knowing full well they weren't going to tune into the trial and see for themselves. So let's go back to that infographic. Let's go through it really quick. I know AD wants to wrap this up. So, Kyle Rittenhouse trial. The claim in the mainstream media, Rittenhouse crossed state lines with his gun to go to the Kenosha protest. The testimony, though, however, was that the gun was kept in Kenosha and he did not take it across state lines. And the prosecutor basically had all the gun charges thrown out yesterday, proving this to be true. The claim, again, published in the mainstream media, Rittenhouse has few or no ties to Kenosha. This is one thing that they've been saying all the time. He's an outsider. He came to this community looking for trouble, to make trouble. Who shows up with an AR to a community that's not his? Meanwhile, the mob is literally a rent-a-mob bust in, and they go from city to city and create violence. But okay, Kyle's the bad guy. In reality, Rittenhouse was a lifeguard in Kenosha at the time, and his father lived there. So he worked in Kenosha, lived part-time in Kenosha when he visits his dad. And then they have the audacity to spread this lie that he has no ties to this community. I think his house with his mom, 17 miles away. I have to drive further for groceries. So it just happened to be outside of state lines. The claim, again, published in the media constantly, including last night, I was listening to some of it. Rittenhouse was an outsider and did not understand law enforcement. The character of this kid that they're putting on trial, and also by extension his mom, because I've seen people say he was raised poorly by a bad mom. This is the kind of kid he is. He was a police explorer for the Graves Lake Police Department, so a police cadet. He's a cadet with the Antioch Fire Department and a certified lifeguard. So this is a kid that, he knows firearms, he knows law enforcement. He was there. He brought a fire extinguisher knowing that he has the skills that some of these adults don't have to mitigate the damage that was happening in his community. And he's a certified lifeguard, meaning that he has first aid skills, CPR, all those kinds of things. The claim is that Rittenhouse shot people as he ran away. The prosecution's own witness confirms that Rittenhouse shot when a pistol was pointed in his face. I saw yesterday the prosecutor say something like, he was a coward because he used a gun when he could have fought this guy off with his hands and fists. And I thought, would this prosecutor say the same thing to me if some guy was trying to drag me into the bushes and I picked up a rock and clubbed him across the head with it? Would I be only limited to hand-to-hand combat because that's what he had? Or do I have the right to pick up whatever's around me, a gun, a pocket knife, a rock, and defend my life for all it's worth? Because would that prosecutor say the same thing to a woman who clubbed her attacker with a rock?
100%. Yeah, and I think that was the assistant DA, wasn't it, that was calling him a coward because he didn't engage in hand-to-hand combat. Hand-to-hand combat with a guy pointing a gun to his head. At what point was Mr. Rittenhouse...
In a frenzied mob?
Yeah. At what point was he supposed to use armed force, which he's entitled to in terms of preserving his life, when the guy actually shoots a bullet so he can shoot the bullet out of the air with his gun? Is this the fantasy world we're in? And here's my list, Sheila, about the so-called victims here that the media and the mob are rallying around. Joseph Rosenbaum, sex offender. Level 3 offender. I think that means he's a pedophile. Failure to remain on register status. Attempted assault and battery. That's his rap sheet. Anthony Huber, assault and battery. Domestic abuse. False imprisonment. Illegal weapon. And then the injured man, Gage Grosskreutz. Felony burglary. Probation violation. Illegal weapon. Assault with an illegal weapon. These are the guys that they are forming, solidarity around. These are the innocent flowers snuffed out in the prime of their life. Give me a break.
These are violent criminals. And these prosecutors are making the argument that this 17-year-old of good, upstanding character who's got an interest in law enforcement, an interest in firefighting, and trained in first aid, CPR, and a lifeguard, They want him to engage in hand-to-hand combat with 3 lunatics running amok, literally running amok, the definition of running amok in somebody else's community, setting fires. The prosecutor yesterday, he said something like, oh, he mocked the property damage, which is a hell of a thing to do if it were your property getting damaged, listening to the prosecutor mock it. But, all they did was drag a trailer out into the street and set it on fire and I guess dance around it like the kids from Lord of the Flies or whatever. Like, these people were just whipped up into an arsonist, violent mob. They were carrying illegal firearms, pointing that at them. I think at one point, Kyle was hit with a skateboard.
Yeah, that's right.
And so he's supposed to still engage in hand-to-hand combat. Put one of these prosecutors in this mob, a mob of anybody, and see how well they fare. And that's what's going to be the thing. Those juries are going to say, put me in that mob? Expect me not to use the gun? No, I don't think so. I think, and especially yesterday, and I know we can't do it on YouTube because YouTube will give us some big problems, but when that prosecutor picked up that AR, the alleged murder weapon, and pointed it at the jury, is he crazy? With his finger in the trigger guard, by the way. He should be charged for that,
Sheila. He should have been charged.
But
we got to get to
Sorry, but I think it'll have the opposite effect on the jury because the jury now can put themselves in Kyle's shoes with a gun pointed at them and know how that feels. And I think the prosecutor totally misread that.
Sheila, we're going to go to chat. The only thing I'm going to say is the only way this kid is found guilty is if there is a politicization of the verdict. The last time I remember something so high profile where politics as opposed to evidence was responsible was the OJ murder trial. He walked because of politics, not because of the evidence, including DNA evidence. And I hope we're not going to see that. I hope this kid is going to be free of this madness. And just because the mob is threatening to carry out arson and vandalization of Kenosha, this poor town that has already suffered more than enough, I'm sorry, justice has to be done here. End of story. Sheila, how about some chats, my friend?
Yeah, a 500 National Guard, by the way, converging on Kenosha to deal with the mob that the mainstream media has whipped up.
Yep.
Olivia Brunei, Olivia, that's Olivia. That works for us.
I'm looking at her right now, her lovely smiling face.
When it gets sent from her account, it's the first name I see, so I read that. Sheila. AMT 60, a buck. I know... Or he says, I don't know a lot about party leadership, but if the majority of Conservative Party members want a leadership change, can they initiate it or does O'Toole have to initiate it? I'm not sure the party rules about that. By the way, I'm in the 11% that hate mandates. Welcome, friend.
That should be the new tattoo for you, Lauren. Sheila. The 11%ers.
Just call me your wife's name.
I don't know. I was hoping you missed that. I don't know what happened there. Anyway.
We both need a break. Mick3CA, $1. Bloomberg says Trudeau may spend $10 billion soon. If I'm him, I'd spend only 1/100th of it to save humans from death and order companies to hire and retain employees who won't submit to tyranny. But Justin Trudeau's the guy who is imposing the tyranny, and he doesn't actually complain about or he doesn't actually care about normal people's jobs. That's, naturally. He's got his job where he doesn't actually have to work, and if his policies put you out of work, he doesn't care. I'm from Alberta. He just said he is going to proceed with net zero by 2050, which means 500,000 at the bare minimum Alberta jobs just vaporized to please everybody at the UN and to, I guess, give my job to somebody who lives in an OPEC country.
But
that's it.
Sheila, conversely, I was speaking to a senior politician off record, and what he said is that one of the reasons the Liberals were reelected, albeit with a minority, was the fact that people that were unemployed, they were getting the CERB, They were just, comfortably living without even working.
Comfortably numb.
Yeah. And there's a demographic going, hey, you know what? I'm okay, mate. Money for nothing and chips for free is, what was the band that said that? I can't remember right now. I'm sure I'll be informed of that. And, I think there's some currency to that. I think the CERB, with a critical mass of people, is what helped the Justin Trudeau Liberals get elected, because he sure didn't deserve it on their merits.
I think that's all the chats.
Okay.
We just had the 2. Thanks very much. I think we're all caught up, and I know AD's itching to get the studio cleared out for somebody else.
Oh, okay then. So, well, thank you to producer AD and Olivia, and thank you to you, Sheila. I got your name right this time.
Oh, my God.
Folks, we shall be back here in this space at this time on Thursday. In the meantime, thank you all for those of you who watched and who gave us some of those super chats. And like I said, in the meantime, stay sane.
Don't enter if you're sick. Yeah, I'm breaking the law. I'm in the bus shelter with no mask on.
It's the motherfucking